Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for Wes Anderson's Asteroid City. With today's episode, boy oh boy, you're in for a treat. The world will never be the same. This is the Geekcentric podcast, and thank you for tuning in to this particular terrestrial frequency. My name is Kev, and today we are set to talk about the filmmaker notorious for telling stories within a story. He's as famous for his overhead shots of hand-placed items as he is his well-dressed characters bathed in pastel palettes. His shots are often center-framed, but are just as likely to include immaculate tracking shots and bullseye-sharp whip pans. Of course, we're talking about Wes Anderson, which means we must be here for our spoiler-free review of Asteroid City. We'd like to give a huge thanks to our friends at Touchwood PR for letting us check out this film before it enters your orbit from Focus Features and Universal Pictures Canada on June 23rd. But first, if you're joining us for the first time, well, we are Geekcentric, a podcast focusing on the world of movies, TV shows, games, toys, and collectibles, and all things geek-centric. Now, just as a Wes Anderson film is a star-studded affair, so too will this podcast star a few studs. My guests today have been French dispatched from the Isle of Dogs. They're coming in like a bottle rocket aboard the Darjeeling Limited. You'll get a Rushmore out of how grand Budapest these two fantastic Mr. Foxes are. More distinguished than the Royal Tannenbaums, and more illustrious than the Life Aquatic, these two are as glorious to behold as a moonrise kingdom. Justin, Darcy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, I think you got all
I nailed it
in there.
I got it.
You got to describe us. That's very well done. How are you?
I'm
Doing good.
I'm ready to talk about this movie. Yeah.
I think
Doing
your
good.
mustache is on point today, Darcy, for this movie.
Yeah, did you
It feels very Wes
the ends a bit.
Anderson. Like, yeah, it's like curled and everything. I feel like you've just stepped out of a Wes Anderson movie to come talk to us about a Wes Anderson movie. Oh, kind of like this movie, right? A movie within a movie, a play within a play. I don't know.
There we go. No, that's perfect. That's perfect. So meta. If only the people at home could see you. Now, before we aren't able to be here because the car exploded, let me fill you in on some of the glorious details of Wes Anderson's latest visual treat. 1955, the American Southwest, Asteroid City, population 87, a 12-stool luncheonette, a 1-pump filling station, a 10-cabin motor court hotel, a telephone booth, and slightly outside of town, a massive crater and an observatory. This weekend, the military and astronomers are welcoming 5 Science Award-winning children to display their inventions. Not far away, over the hills, mushroom clouds from atomic tests are seen. What begins as a celebration to honor the achievements of the junior stargazers receives an unexpected visitor, an alien. Asteroid City is locked down, and a fake cover story is concocted by the Army. But the precocious geniuses, in a way that calls to mind the youngsters of Spielberg classics, have a plan to get the word to the outside world. Written and directed by Wes Anderson, the film marks the 11th such feature-length project from the brilliantly unique mind of the world's foremost postmodern auteur. The movie features a star-studded lineup of new players and returning Anderson favorites, including Jason Schwartzman, Scarlett Johansson, Tom Hanks, Jeffrey Wright, Tilda Swinton, Bryan Cranston, Edward Norton, Adrian Brody, Liev Schreiber, Hope Davis, Stephen Park, Rupert Friend, Maya Hawke, Steve Carell, Matt Dillon, Hong Chow, Willem Dafoe, Margot Robbie, Tony Revolori, Jake Ryan, and Jeff Goldblum. Well, gents, before I run out of breath, do we think this movie belongs on the front page of every newspaper? Let's find out. Justin, let's start with you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my time with this movie. I thought it was the right amount of Wes Anderson, which you know and love. Huge cast, very Americana, great visual effects and color palette. All of the, as you described, the auteur styles of Wes Anderson on display. But there was a difference in terms of story, I found. I think that this is more introspective. I think that this is a little bit more broader. I think that it's not necessarily a conventional narrative. There's a little ambiguity in and around it, and I think when I left, when we left the movie, I was kind of like, I didn't know how to feel about it, but after sitting with it, I actually kind of enjoyed that aspect. I think it, from talking with you guys and thinking about it a little bit more, I think that's the point. I think that the point of the movie is to leave you thinking rather than simply feeling concluded with this story, which I appreciated. I think that's a bit different for Wes. There's always a sense of closure to a lot of his movies, and not that this one doesn't have a strong sense of closure. I just think that the intent of closure is different because it's meant to make you think. And I appreciated that because I think that that's different for Wes Anderson in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think there's a definitive end to the story that we see, but there could be so much more to this story. And I think where we leave the characters with it is they're just starting to reflect on their own lives and their place in the world. And we sort of leave them as they go off to do that. We don't see them sort of finalize and come to those conclusions. And that, like you said, sort of leaves the viewer to set their own understanding of what the meaning of this play within a movie means, not just to the characters, but to the audience viewing them. And there's this great balance of, science versus faith, and real life versus maybe how you fantasize what your life is, but it isn't actually that way.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool that it leaves you to interpret what you've just seen to your own sort of thoughts and the way you approach your own life.
Which feels so refreshingly different for Wes. Like while everything feels inherently true to his style, I think narratively this feels very different. But that could also be a negative for some people.
I mean, the one thing that I love about Wes Anderson, of course, are the characters. And the one thing this movie does really well is make you quickly fall in love with the quirky cast and all the flaws that they have and want to see where they end up. And like you guys were saying, that the end is kind of ambiguous, where they ride off into the sunset, but is the sunset going to be as bright as we're hoping or not? And I think that's one of the great things about this movie is the fact that you're left wanting more despite having a satisfying end nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's some deep themes about life and the meaning of life. And again, I think that these are very big weighted things that, like, I think Wes can handle it, obviously, but he's handling it in his own unique way with this movie. But this is bigger than anything else that he's really handled in past movies that seem more familial or, relationship based. This has that nuance of relationship based, but it's also about the bigger picture, right? Of existence and life. And like you said, Kevin, like the idea of science versus faith, what's real, what's not real, the play within the movie, like it all adds this layer of, making you question, and I think even, and to a certain degree, having the characters within this story question things. And I think that's interesting because it kind of puts them in the place of where the audience is as well.
And now that said, I still think, as complicated as that might seem, it really didn't feel complicated as we were watching it. And I think it's a far more approachable movie for casual fans. You don't have to, I don't think, be as much of a Wes Anderson diehard to gravitate towards this one, say, compared to French Dispatch, which I know a lot of people, just didn't really feel connected to in the same kind of way. The characters were a bit more static. They were a bit more...
They served the purpose for each of the narratives, right? Whereas like there's always a story within a story, as you mentioned with Wes Anderson's films, but that was very literal, like 3 different stories that just connected in some way. They just felt like they were Parisian French inspired stories that existed in that world. Whereas here, I think it does feel like it's almost like a return to form or structure, because it does center around, yes, there's stories within stories, but it is focused on a set of characters that we can follow through, from start to finish, on their journey and where they start and where they end in this movie.
And now, speaking of these characters, I mean, I think we can agree, and Darcy, you touched on it, the performances here are top-notch. I'll start off. Yeah. This is my favorite Jason Schwartzman, Wes Anderson role. He's had a couple that I've really liked in the past. I really liked him in, say, Darjeeling. I know that a lot of people will point to Rushmore as maybe his standout.
No, Darjeeling is my favorite as well.
Yeah,
he was the brother. He was
just
so funny. He was hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was in top form here. This was like a mature Jason Schwartzman. And
Yep.
I mean, what a month he's had for fans like us. You know, he was a standout in Spider-Verse, and now here he is in a more traditional role that you would associate with him, and he did such a great job.
He has this sense of like maturity and seriousness. It's different for him, and the comedic timing that he has. You know, he's not overtly funny. It's almost as if situations put him in a bit of a funny situation, if you will. Yeah.
His delivery was incredible. Like every time it'd be he knew exactly how long to pause to get that laugh and make it pop just perfectly. Like, yeah, again, this was Schwartzman in peak form. I'd have to agree that this is now bumped to the top of the list as best performance in a Anderson film.
Yeah, and I think his son as well, played by Jake Ryan,
Woodrow.
Woodrow. He was really, really great as well, and I think the two worked off of each other really, really well as a father-son dynamic. Just to see how the two have different outlooks and different opinions, and how they vary, but they are very similar in terms of their reproach and how they handle things. So I think it was, they really worked well together, and I think in a lot of ways it captured that, father-son Americana dynamic that you would expect from 50s, 60s father-son relationship. And Augie is the main character, but I also think Woodrow is another main character, and to see their outlook in this story of Asteroid City, it's very interesting as the story unfolds.
Absolutely. We're following everything in this part of the story through their eyes and how they experience and interpret everything. And I think what really helps them stand out is, so often Wes Anderson characters are caricatures, whereas these two are just so authentically genuine to who they are as a character that it feels real and kind of resonates in this otherwise pretty zany world that he's created here in Asteroid City.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the first time we've seen Scarlett Johansson in a Wes Anderson movie, if I'm not mistaken. And she was absolutely fantastic. And with that as well, Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks has had an interesting ride of roles, I think, over the last year or a bit. But this felt very much a good marriage of Wes Anderson providing a great character for Tom Hanks to lean into, and Tom Hanks just being able to bring what he brings, and that sort of gentleman charm, if you will. So I enjoyed his performance in this movie. And
I'd say with Tom, you barely get enough of him. Whereas like the one issue when you have a cast like this is that so many of the actors and their characters feel almost shortchanged. There's almost enough time to fit in enough screen time and moments with all of them. And so while, we mentioned the three probably primary main characters in Jason Schwartzman, Jake Ryan, and Scarlett Johansson, Tom's kind of on that borderline where like we do see him enough throughout that I feel like I got my Tom Hanks fix, but there's so many, like Lee Schreiber feels like he's on the screen for 10 seconds, and I love every time he's there.
Yeah, and all these side characters that like, to your point, feel very much like side characters, but they're still adding something. Like Maya Hawke and Rupert Friend, their story very much intertwines, and Rupert Friend was actually surprisingly good. All I've known him from has been Obi-Wan as the Grand Inquisitor, right? So to see him play his name's Montana, and man,
a
he feel like
cowboy.
Exactly, and he's British, right? So I think that again, really great character acting from Rupert Friend, and Maya Hawke, from Stranger Things, has really come in her own as an actress, and this is definitely a way for her to shine in that, again, another caricature. Like there are some really great characters around there. Like Steve Carell is really great as the motel manager, right?
I love the hotel manager.
He's so funny, and he's absolutely hilarious, and Jeff Goldblum has a great role in this movie. That is,
it's small, but there's no part too small for Jeff Goldblum to do well.
And that's what I love. Like you have such a long list of, a star-studded cast featured in this movie, and some people pop in, like Hong Chau's in this movie, and she just pops in for a scene or two, and then she's gone. And then Margot Robbie has a surprising role in this. And I think that that's, again, it just goes to show that these actors will jump at the opportunity to work with someone like Wes Anderson. And whether the role is small or large, they're still going to be incorporated and valued in a lot of ways. Because I think as much as Margot Robbie she's very minimally in it, she still has poignancy. There's a purpose to it, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's like one of the reasons why I love Wes Anderson is that he manages to give these characters so much depth and personality just from a quick introduction. Like immediately you understand who these characters are and why you're supposed to like them and want to follow their story. And I think this movie is a perfect example. We could list all these characters who had, just small roles and they're in the background for the most part. Like Jeffrey Wright was incredible. Bryan Cranston, like everyone in this movie pulled off their roles so well, but they're gone so fast that you want more, but are okay with what you got
exactly, with what they brought.
It's
exactly.
It all comes together to tell just a wonderfully charming story, and that's what Wes Anderson does best, is wonderfully charming. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's no role too small that somebody wouldn't jump at the opportunity to be in these movies, and they all bring their A game when they do it. I don't think it would work if you just showed up and were like, yeah, what are my 3 lines? I'll phone it in, and you have to come and be able to take these 3 lines and make that character pop and be understood. Mm-hmm. And so it's such great chemistry and teamwork between filmmaker and his cast.
Mm-hmm. I think it's in the same vein, though, of someone like, Quentin Tarantino, another auteur, if you will. You jump at the opportunity to be in a Quentin Tarantino movie, whether your role's big or small, but you're gonna bring something. And usually, very much like Quentin Tarantino, Wes Anderson's characters that he has, like you pointed out, they're characters. They're designed around an archetypal character-esque feature. And I think that can be said about some of these side characters as well. You know what I mean? Like, we mentioned Steve Carell as the motel manager and just his approach of being this, sales forward, customers always right character. And, there's a level of reserve to his character, which I think is refreshingly different for him. So I think it's great that he's able to, amass so many different people and they're just willing to jump in and bring what they can to the characters.
Well, I love that you brought up Steve Carell again, as I found out a kind of a neat little piece of trivia, and it sort of stems from the idea of, returning familiar casts that are always in Wes Anderson films versus a newcomer like Steve Carell. He actually replaced Bill Murray in the role of the hotel manager. Bill Murray got COVID just before filming. And it's actually the second time he replaced Bill Murray in a movie. Bill Murray was supposed to have his role in Little Miss Sunshine, if you can believe it. He was originally scheduled for that. So, I could see Bill Murray fitting into the role here seamlessly. That one's a little bit more odd, but I just find it interesting. It's the second time he's kind of, hey, I got your back, Bill. Don't worry.
Another thing I just want to call out, and I think it's something that is inherently a part of Wes Anderson, is his visual aesthetic and just the presentation of his movies. Again, this is a great example of a meticulous attention to detail. It's evident in every frame. Colors are very fitting for this era of time that we're in. Some things are vibrant, some things are muted. It's all, again, just thoughtfully crafted, and the symmetrical compositions. It's always a pleasure to look at these shots as the way the camera's tracking, or if it's just locked off on a tripod or something like that. And I think the one thing I really appreciate about Wes Anderson's movies is his approach to visual effects. There seems to be a beautiful combination of practical effects with seemingly almost like stop motion visual effects that feel inherently different and feel unique to Wes Anderson, right? Like they don't feel like it's anything that you've seen before. And I think the most evident would be something like Grand Budapest. You see a lot of that in the way that the miniature of the hotel and the way things are kind of composed in there. But here too, like with the way that the explosions happen, the way the cactuses look, and that was all by design. There was a lot of set design elements that were placed to make this environment, which apparently was shot in Spain. So.
Wow.
This desert was Spain. And they set up cactuses and made a road and everything like that. So, again, it's designed. Again, we keep referencing the play within the play. the set design was designed as a play. And I think that that's really smart, and it helps to sort of lean into, I guess, again, that era that we're staying in, which is like what, 50s, 60s, if you will. It has that sort of, again, I reference it as the Americana style. Of
the
that, right?
dying days of the Wild West, if you will.
Exactly.
And I mean, you mentioned Grand Budapest and this, and how, there's all these shots with that sort of practical effect work, and it's almost, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. It's not intentionally bad, but it's almost intentionally amateurish, and then you film it with his incredible technique and his incredible eye for framing.
Yeah, it's not meant to look believable, right?
Yes, it looks, very fantastical.
Artificial, and fantastical, whimsical, right? It adds to the whimsy of a lot of it. And I think that has a lot to do with what he learned when making, Fantastic Mr. Fox, and then, later Isle of Dogs, just implementing stop motion. There's a great scene in the Asteroid. I won't give it away, but that scene with in the Asteroid is very telling to the sort of visual spectacle that Wes Anderson likes to lean into. And I think you're right on the money there. It's not about it looking believable and real. It's about it looking whimsically artificial, and very intentional. It's all done intentionally, and I think that's great. Again, it is so specific to Wes Anderson, and I love that. I like that.
Whimsy is the exact word, because that scene you're talking about could have gone so many ways, and it could have almost taken you out of the movie, and instead it elicits the biggest laughter from the audience, because you're having so much fun looking at what you're seeing, and it's just that silliness that they chose to sort of frame all of that in that works so darn well. And then you go to another scene, and you're looking over a character's shoulder, through a window, through another window at a character. Then you get a dolly shot panning across this room, looking out another window where characters perfectly timed walk in, do their actions. Then you frame back, and you're right where you were, and it's all done like to the centimeter of perfection. Like you said, everything is so intentional that when you get the whimsical side of it, it's a lot of fun. When you get the very practical side of it, it's like, damn, that was an impressive shot. And they all sort of juxtapose through these movies to create a unique Wes Anderson feel to his films. Now, was there anything that didn't quite land for you? I know we really enjoyed it, but was there any small critiques you might have?
I think the play within the play was very smart, but I'll just refer to it now as the black and white and the color. I think we could have had a little more of the black and white to help kind of maybe round out what was going on in the world of color. For me, at least, I thought there was a bit more of an opportunity in those moments that were, I think, intentionally meant to be the real, the more of life, whereas you're getting so absorbed in the color. And again, this could just be by design, and again leaving the audience to sort of have their own interpretations and whatnot. But I think there could have been just a better balance of seeing what was going on behind the scenes versus in relation to what was happening in this dramatization of Asteroid City.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. I want to see more of the black and white, if only because I feel like that would be a perfect opportunity for Wes Anderson to explore what he loves about making movies. And a lot of that comes down to working with the actors to develop these characters. And we get teases of that throughout the movie, but it's never enough for me to be like, yes, this is why he makes movies. And it's, again, just leaves me wanting a bit more. I don't really consider that a negative per se.
Sure.
It's just, it's something that I walked out of it being like, oh darn, this could have been a bit longer.
Well, it's more or less, it just feels imbalance, right? Like, I guess in that sense, like, and again, like you said, it's not an explicit negative that like took me right out, but I think there could have just been more of an opportunity. At the end of the day, I think that you could have, to have less of it, it could have opened and closed with this black and white world, but we're constantly being pulled in and out, and at times it felt like it was meant to mean something more, especially in the way things get a little more philosophical in the black and white. Things get a little more introspective, especially given the fact that Adrian Brody's exists in that side of the story and what his character kind of symbolizes. But I appreciated the idea of what he was trying to do with that. Because I think in a lot of cases, when we see stories within stories with Wes, they inform the larger story. Whereas I think here, these are almost two separate stories that are made to sort of connect in ways and layer into each other, but it's not necessarily as clear. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
The only real connection is the actors playing the characters in any given scenario, right? There isn't a lot of the overlap there. And, you know, Wes is notorious for making shorter movies. I mean, nowadays movies are so long, almost too long. It's like every movie's 2.5, 2 hours and 40 minutes. This was a crisp, short hour and 44 minutes. And that's his runtime is about an hour 30 to an hour 50 constantly. But this is the first time where at the end of it, I was like, 10 more minutes on the black and white story to really flesh out the connection between those characters and how what we see in the colored world, like the world of color, how that was shaped by this black and white world, and almost vice versa, the impact that world has on the characters in that world.
There's a moment where we break from the color into the black and white with Jason Schwartzman's character that I think was supposed to be a lot more impactful, but I don't know if it necessarily landed as impactful because we didn't necessarily spend enough time in the black and white. We didn't see enough of that philosophical questioning happening in the black and white leading into this moment. So I don't know. I guess for me, I can see that. I appreciate the idea that Wes is trying to push boundaries with the way he's trying to tell the story. I think though that again, that would be my only negative, is that a little more balance in how the two inform each other rather than one feeling more heavy and the other feeling a little light.
100%. Well, what a strange experience this is. I think it's time to give our final thoughts on the movie, as well as our scores for the film, which we'll be doing on a scale of 1 to 5 vending machine martinis. Darce, why don't you lead us off?
Well, like I said, this movie captures everything that I love about Wes Anderson movies and elevates it to the next level. The point where my only negative with the movie is that I want to spend more time getting to know these characters. So I think that goes to speak volumes for the story he managed to craft and these characters that have captured our hearts so firmly in such a short amount of time. This is a strong 4.5 out of 5 vending machine martinis.
Nice. Oh, so the machine served them strong, are they? That's my kind of vending machine. All right. Justin, how about you?
I love Wes Anderson. I love all the work that he's done, and this doesn't disappoint as being a Wes Anderson film. I think Asteroid City is a delightful experience, and it doesn't necessarily have the conventional narrative that you would know from a Wes Anderson movie, but I appreciate that the unconventional storytelling feels like it's meant to allow the audience to think a little bit more. And I appreciate that. I appreciate what he did. Did it work though? I don't know. Again, given the fact that, as we were mentioning, the balance between the black and white and the color, I think that left me wanting a little bit more in terms of adding clarity to the overall story. But that said, it's an enchanting journey into an imaginative cosmos. And I think that it has, again, stunning aesthetics, stellar performances from the entire cast, and it has a very unique style of storytelling. And I think this all comes together to encapsulate what makes Wes Anderson a distinct filmmaker and what makes his style so distinct, with attention to detail, characters that are memorable, and of course a whole lot of whimsy. And I think for a lot of fans, they're going to enjoy aspects of it, but I also think that this may be a bit of a divisive one, where some people are going to be in the camp of they really, really enjoyed it, and others that might be like, I don't know, I don't think that this is very Wes Anderson. I think he, it seems a little too outside of that box. So while I appreciate the bold swings that Wes is doing with Asteroid City, I think it can use some refinement. So I'll be giving this one a 4 out of 5 vending machine martinis.
I definitely agree with the areas of concern, if you will. It wasn't things that sucked about the movie. It's just things that challenged you to want a bit more. But one thing I think he really delivers on is that, as we've been talking about these two sort of distinct worlds, they both came with these two incredibly distinct looks. And you wouldn't have needed one to be in color and one to be in black and white to feel that. They're filmed entirely different.
Yeah.
and that was so cool.
Aspect
and yet,
ratios are different.
Yeah, and then yet at the same time, they're both distinctly Wes Anderson.
Yes.
And we spend more time in the colorful world, and it's maybe the most beautiful I've ever seen him film in. The color palettes that they use here, they looked like paintings, and each frame could just be frozen and be a frame-worthy piece of art. And yet, as you're watching it, these paintings are moving. It was such a surreal experience during certain scenes. There's a particular one where we pan over about 12 people, each sitting at tables talking. And each one just felt like this moving painting, and I just absolutely loved it. And then one other thing we didn't really touch on was the music here. I thought it was such a cool combination of, you've got this long-lost Western frontier mixed with, a B-movie sci-fi film. And Wes Anderson often works with longtime collaborator Alexandre Desplat. And he's just got such a unique skill of combining instruments that don't necessarily belong together. In this movie, he used everything from banjos to the glockenspiel to violins and French horns, and just to create this score that is so distinctly this movie and the feel of this weird cowboys and aliens movie that Wes is going for here.
While we're on the topic of music, shout out to Rupert Friend, who was credited as playing the slide guitar. He went that far for this cowboy role to learn how to play slide guitar. Also, Seo Jorge makes his return, so that was always happy. Anyway, Kev, back to you.
No, that's such a great point, because for him to successfully play this song, it makes so much sense, because then the soundtrack combines old Western movie classics from icons like Tex Ritter, Bill Monroe, and Roy Rogers. And so, he finds a way to make his own iconic 50s Western John Wayne era song. And it fits so well, and it felt so authentic. And he felt like a real cowboy sitting around the campfire just singing into the night. And so, all the kudos to him for actually learning, a difficult instrument like that. But just in final thoughts here, this is a Wes Anderson film for Wes Anderson fans. And yet, in my opinion, I think because of the whimsy, it might be a bit more approachable than some of his, latest movies, in particular, French Dispatch, which I know really had people divided. Even, I think the four of us reviewed it for the podcast a few years ago, and we had very, very mixed feelings on that. So while the story combines several overlapping stories, I just found that in some ways it was more cohesive and a complete narrative, just in that the characters were so fleshed out in this one particular instance that you felt an attachment to them, and I felt like I really understood who they were and why they behaved the way they did and believed the way they did. And for that, I was really appreciative. So I'm going to give this movie a solid, like Darcy, 4.5 out of 5 vending machine martinis. I'm a Wes Anderson mark. He's in my top 3 filmmakers of all time. And so while I might be a bit skewed, if you like Wes Anderson, you have to check this movie out. And if you're looking
without a doubt,
if you're looking for an amazing cast of characters, this is something to check out. And if you love a visual style to your films, this is something to check out. I think there's a little something for everyone who likes and loves films the way we do.
Agreed.
Awesome. Well, that's it for this review of Asteroid City from Focus Features and Universal Pictures Canada, which leaves the quarantine zone and is coming to theaters everywhere June 23rd. Once again, a huge thanks to our friends at Touchwood PR for the early screening so that we could get this review to you early and let you know if this movie cratered on arrival, or if it was worthy of awards like the Collapsing Star Ribbon of Success, the Black Hole Badge of Triumph, the Red Giant Sash of Honor, the Distant Nebula's Laurel Crown, or the White Dwarf Medal of Achievement. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't steal our asteroid or our good moods, and make sure to subscribe to us wherever you like to listen to podcasts if you haven't already. We can't wait to hear your thoughts on this latest entry into Wes Anderson's incomparable film repertoire. Please let us know by writing in to wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or if you think you'd feel more at home outside of the Earth's atmosphere, you can reach us on Twitter @GeekcentricYT and on Instagram @WeAreGeekcentric. Well, we are well underway on our Geekcentric Summer Marathon. Available now are our spoiler-free and spoiler-filled reviews of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, as well as our spoiler-free thoughts on Transformers Rise of the Beasts and Pixar's Elemental. We just released interviews with some of the incredible talent behind Marvel's Secret Invasion, as well as our spoiler-free thoughts for episodes 1 and 2, and our newest Watch Club series for the show begins this Friday, so be sure to check those out. Also coming at you like a thundering boulder are interviews with some of the cast, as well as our spoiler-free review for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Of course, summer is just getting started, and we will have a ton more reviews, interviews, and more coming out for the biggest in TV and movies all season long. But until then, Darcy, Justin, thanks for hanging out and doing what we love. And as we say,
Laters.
Get home safe, guys.
Peace.